Welcome to the semi-finals of the Women's World Cup 2025. We have Koneru Humpy with the black pieces against Lei Tingjie from China. It's black to move here. We've reached the 8th move. On the last move, white played her queen to b3, setting up an attack on the f7 point, and Humpy moves her pawn to d5 and attacks the bishop. Let's have a look at how this game reached here. Lei Tingjie opened the game with e4 and Humpy responded with super solid e5. We had the Ruy Lopez and Humpy played the knight f6, which leads to the Berlin. The anti-Berlin with d3 and a very interesting move chosen by Humpy, knight e7. Not common. The main move here is bishop c5, but knight e7 sets a nice trap. If you take on e5, then here I go c6, attacking the bishop, and once the bishop drops back, there's a check and I win the knight. So in this position, bishop c4 was played, pawn to c6, a4, d6, the knight jumped to g6, and after queen b3, we reach the game position with d5. And after pawn takes pawn in this position, Humpy has a decision to make. Should she take with the pawn? There is check here. She takes back with the knight, which is a fine move. But there was also a possibility to play b5, which was an incredible resource. After takes, now to take d5 so that there is no bishop b5 check. But anyway, after knight d5, white castles, black plays bishop out to e7. And here, rook e1 by Lei Tingjie. She's attacking the pawn on e5. And Humpy simply castles, giving up this pawn because after knight e5, rook e5, she's confident of her compensation with bishop d6, and then queen could jump into h4, Marshall-like compensation. So knight d2 played here. Lei Tingjie not really interested in the material. Queen comes to c7, defending the pawn on e5, and now pawn to d4. A very nice move. White is gaining a small edge in the position, and Humpy takes the pawn. Now remember, white can at any point try to win a pawn by taking on d5 twice, but that's not going to be feasible to get an advantage because black would quickly develop. But now after knight d4, this is under pressure. So Humpy goes back knight to b6. And the bishop here comes to f1. Humpy now plays her bishop to d6. She's attacking the pawn on h2. h3 is possible, but Lei Tingjie plays g3. One of her ideas is to put the bishop on g2 perhaps. Now Humpy plays her knight to d7. Maybe this knight, never really comfortable here on b6, goes here. Could come to e5, could go to f6, queen comes back to c2, and Humpy brings her knight to e5. Very interesting decision, but f4 does look super strong. Look at this, f4, knight to g4, and now knight to e4 would give white a very good position. Instead, she went bishop g2, and Humpy plays her pawn to a6, preparing the move c5. f4 now played. Maybe it's a move too slow. So now knight to g4, and now if you play knight e4, which is possible, h3 is also a playable idea. Goes knight e4, Humpy pushes the pawn c5, and now knight takes d6, definitely a good move. And if queen d6, you go back. If cd4, you just come back. White is better, but instead she goes knight f3, and this gives Humpy the chance to equalize. She goes bishop f5, fantastic move, pinning the knight on e4. Now Lei Tingjie goes in for this tactical idea of knight f6 check. Humpy chops off the knight, knight takes f6, queen takes the bishop, and now rook a to e8, offering a trade of rooks. Plays her bishop to d2, connecting here, but knight jumps back and attacks the queen. The queen has to move away. So queen goes to c2. And now Humpy plays this pawn to c4. A very nice move. The knight could move from d7 to c5 to d3 perhaps. It's all very interesting. h3 played. And now a very good move could be knight d5. There's also knight h5 to put pressure here. But Humpy goes knight c6. Not absolutely clear to me what the knight is doing here. Maybe she wants to go knight a5 to b3. First, the bishop comes to c5, taking away squares from this bishop on d2. Knight to g5, attacking the pawn on h7. And pawn comes up to h6. And now white plays knight to e4. Humpy chops off the knight. Knight takes knight. Lei Tingjie now takes with the bishop. Bishop takes e4. The position is roundabout even, but white does have the bishop pair. And Humpy is playing ambitiously. She's trying to go to b3. And then the a4 pawn could get potentially weak. So Lei Tingjie plays rook e2. In order to create this doubling of the rooks on the e file. Humpy jumps in with knight to b3, attacking the rook on a1. The rook goes to e1. Now the rooks are doubled up here. And in comes rook d8, a fantastic move. Because now there was bishop h7 check and threat to win the rook. But that has been solved. Bishop goes back. The a4 pawn is weak. b6 played here by Humpy. And the bishop goes back to g2. Queen comes up to d7, attacking the pawn on a4. And now maybe it was a bit too premature because f5, white gets intense compensation with f6. So rook queen d3 played to trade the queens. Like if you would have taken here f6 and white is already doing really well. So Humpy decided to trade queens, and after bishop e4, the position is going to peter out into equality. Bishop takes, queen takes queen, bishop takes queen, and just knight takes bishop happens here. Rook takes c1, and Humpy now can play just rook e8. It's opposite colored bishop, dark square, light square. Rook e8 played. It's move number 38. And the players offered I think Humpy was the one who offered a draw. Lei Tingjie has accepted, and game number 1 of the semi-finals of the FIDE World Cup has ended in a draw. I must say a good result for Koneru Humpy, as she had the black pieces and now can try in the second game with the white pieces. A draw would mean in that game that we move to the tie breaks, rapid and blitz, while if Humpy or Lei Tingjie, anyone manages to win, they go through to the finals. So a lot at stake, but a good beginning for the Indian Grandmaster. We have Tan Zhongyi versus Divya Deshmukh, and Divya has played a very interesting opening with pawns in the center. She could very well be left with an isolated pawn if white takes on c5 or black takes on d4. And here Divya thinks for her move. She's wondering what to play. It's black to move, and she comes up with c takes d4. Let's have a look at how we reach this position. White opens the game with d4, d5, c4, e6. The queen's gambit declined. Knight comes to f3, knight f6, e3 played by Tan Zhongyi, a6 by Divya, and now after knight d2, she went c5, very uncompromising, takes ed, b3 played. She brings her knight out, bishop comes to b2 and bg4. Opponent plays bishop to e2, and now Divya takes on f3 unprovoked. Maybe it's part of her prep, but bishop d6 was the more common move. Take, knight takes, and now she takes on d4, and we reach the position that is in the game. So after c takes d4, now Tan Zhongyi has an option to take with the pawn or the knight or the bishop. She takes with the knight, which is the most natural and logical move. But Divya plays bishop a3, a very surprising move. And the idea is, if you take the bishop, I have a check to win back the bishop here. So bishop a3, and now Tan Zhongyi takes the bishop. Divya could have actually played bishop b4 check as well when king f1, and I think white is doing quite well. So that's the reason why she goes bishop a3, bishop takes a3, queen check, and now queen d2 seems like a normal move. After queen a3 I can castle, but instead b4, a very aggressive move, and after queen takes a3, now the b4 pawn is a bit loose. White castles, a good move, because after queen b4 you have rook e1, rook b1, queen e7, knight f5 attacking here. That is no good. So Divya plays short castles, which is the most logical. And now after take, pawn takes, yes, black has weaknesses on c6 and a6, but b4 is also pretty huge weakness. Rook c1 played, attacking the pawn on c6. And Divya brings her rook to c8. She's now attacking the pawn on a2. Tan Zhongyi plays her queen to b3. I believe she's no longer that ambitious in this position. She's like, I think a draw should work out fine for me. She takes on b3, Divya here. A b3 taken. And Divya plays h6. Divya has some problems to solve, because if she goes rook b8, the a6 pawn is falling. Rook c2, Tan Zhongyi tries to put pressure on the c file, and so Divya, instead of moving the a rook, moves the c rook. And after rook takes c6, rook takes b4 is played, so that after a6 pawn is taken, the b3 pawn also falls. So she tries to defend the pawn with rook b1. But Divya plays a5. And the point is, she wants to play a4. The bishop comes to d3, defending the rook. And king comes out to f8. Tan Zhongyi plays bishop to c2, and Divya now final move to equalize. Perhaps one more move needed later, but a4 is a great move because she trades pieces and gets rid of that a pawn which was isolated. Takes, bishop takes, and rook takes a4. So now the threat is rook a1 to win maybe some material, but g3 is very well played, because after rook a1 there is rook b6. But Divya now pushes the pawn to d4. She is equalized out of the opening. Pawn takes pawn, rook takes pawn, king comes up to g2, and Divya brings her rook back to d7. So pawn to h3 played by Tan Zhongyi, and Divya brings her rook to b7, attacking the bishop. Bishop comes out to d3. And finally king e7, you can see the rook, king and knight well placed. 30 moves have been completed, and maybe a draw seems like the most logical result here. Yes, Tan Zhongyi accepts it. Divya draws with the black pieces. She will, like Humpy, have the white pieces to put pressure on her opponent in the second game. A lot to play for here. 3 spots in the candidates, prize money, a lot of things that every chess player dreams about are to be won here. Let's see if Divya manages to do that and reach the finals. But for now, she's made a strong start and she's shown excellent opening preparation. She did thank her coach in the previous interview she did with FIDE, and maybe she'll reveal her coach someday. But for now, we wish her the best in
Washington,
this World Cup.
D.C., August